My name was Thomas Vey, Sergeant, 214th Kessendron Rifles, the Regiment. I say was because a man who has done what I have done stops being the boy who started it. I am recording this the night before I ship out again, and I am too old for that. And everyone who could tell me so is dead. So I will tell myself. I was born on Cassandra's Reach, a fortress world, all walls and drill yards and grey sky. We did not have summers there, not really. We had a season when the wind off the northern glacis dropped below freezing only at night instead of all day. Children on the Reach were given a lasgun stock to hold before they were given a spoon of their own. My mother put my hand on the ridged grip of my father's rifle when I was 4 years old and said, "This is heavier than it looks, and one day it will be the only thing that answers when you call for help." I did not understand her. I understand her now. By 6, I could strip a power pack. By 9, I had stood watch on the outer wall during a drill alert, holding a lasgun I was too small to properly brace, while older cadets laughed at the way it knocked me backward when I dry-fired it. By 12, I had seen my first execution. That is the formative trauma, if you want it named plainly. A conscript 2 years my senior, a boy named Prewitt, fell asleep on watch during a live drill. Not a real attack, a drill. He fell asleep anyway. The provost brought him before the assembled company at dawn, and a commissar attached to the training cadre, a woman with a augmetic eye that never blinked, shot him through the back of the skull without a speech, without cruelty, without hesitation, and then turned to the rest of us and said, "The enemy does not care that you were tired." That was the whole sermon. I did not sleep well for a year. I understood eventually that she was not punishing Prewitt. She was keeping the rest of us alive. On the Reach, mercy killed you slower than discipline did. I carried that lesson through every year that followed, and it never once proved wrong, which is the worst thing I can say about it. I took my oath at 17, in the stone yard under the eyes of a chaplain, and a portrait of the emperor so old the paint had gone the color of dried blood. They read out the roster of the newly formed 214th, and that is where I met the people this story is actually about. Because a soldier's memory is not really about himself. It is about who stood next to him. Corporal Ansel Thray, older than the rest of us, already going grey at the temples though he was barely 30, a man who could field strip a heavy stubber blindfolded, and who taught me that a soldier who complains about his boots is a soldier still capable of caring whether he lives. The day a man stops complaining is the day you watch him close. Private Juna Kess, our best shot, quiet, precise, who kept a tally of confirmed kills, scratched into the stock of her long lars in a private code only she could read, and who never once raised her voice in 4 years I served beside her. Private Igan Barrow, built like a cargo loader, carried the squad's heavy weapon like it was a toy, laughed at things that were not funny because laughing was the only thing he had that the war hadn't taken yet. Private Odalis Ferro, my rival first, my friend after, competitive to the point of stupidity in training, the kind of soldier who volunteered for the worst details just to prove she could survive them. She is the only one of us still breathing besides me, and I will get to why that matters. And Sergeant Mikhail Dross, who ran our platoon like he'd invented soldiering, who had a way of putting a hand on your shoulder before an assault that made you believe, for exactly as long as his hand was there, that you would be fine. Over all of us stood Commissar Aldrich Voss, assigned to the 214th at its founding, and never once transferred out in the years I am telling you about. He was not cruel for pleasure. I want that understood. He shot 2 men in my time under him, and both times he told us afterward, in that flat parade ground voice, exactly why, and both times he was right, and both times I hated him anyway. That is what a commissar is for. Not to be loved, to be correct when correctness costs something. Our first deployment was an ambush, and I will tell it the way it happened, not the way it is told in recruiting broadsheets. We were escorting a supply column through a river valley on a world whose name does not matter anymore. The Voxcaster on our Chimera crackled with static instead of orders. The air smelled of wet metal and the local vegetation, something sweetish and rotten, like fruit left too long in a hot storeroom. Then the tree line on the ridge opened up, and the world became noise. I do not remember deciding to fire. I remember the weight of the laser gun kicking into my shoulder, the smell of ozone off the barrel, Barrow's stubber hammering somewhere to my left loud enough to feel in my teeth, and Thray dragging a wounded trooper by the webbing of his flak vest while shouting my name like it was the only word he knew. I killed a man that day. I saw him fall, and I felt nothing, and then an hour later, in the back of the Chimera, I felt everything at once, and Dross put his hand on my shoulder and said nothing, because there was nothing to say, and that was enough. That was the shape of the years that followed. We were sent against the Greenskins on 3 separate campaigns. Orcs, if you want the word plainly, because they do not deserve a softer one. They came at us howling, delighted by their own violence, crude war machines belching smoke, and they did not break like disciplined men break. They had to be killed to the last, because they did not know how to stop, and killing that many of anything costs you everything you have. Ammunition rationing became a fact of daily life, 3 power cells a week per rifle, no exceptions, and a man who burned through his ration recklessly got a talking to from Voss that he did not want twice. We lost 1/5 of our strength in the first Orc campaign alone. Fresh conscripts arrived by the trainload to replace them, boys who did not yet know how to hold their faces still, and we taught them, the way Dross and Thray had taught us, because that is what the Guard is. Not an army of heroes, an army of replacements, taught fast, spent honestly. I want to tell you about the thing that happened on Kaldrenic Prime, because it is the reason I am recording this at all, and because it is the part of my life I understand the least, even now. Kaldrenic Prime had been struck from the navigational charts 3 centuries before we arrived there. A forge world once, a place of manufactorum spires and promethium refineries that had gone dark and silent, its astropathic beacon dead, its name unspoken by the Adeptus Mechanicus, for reasons no one below the rank of magos was ever told. We were not sent there to fight. We were sent there as escort, because a Mechanicus expedition, 3 tech priests, a retinue of Skitari and enough servitors to fill a transport hold, had picked up a faint signal from the planet and insisted on investigating it in person. And someone had decided that a company of guardsmen should go along in case the irregularities the magos kept referring to turned out to have teeth. They had teeth. We made planetfall in the shadow of a manufactorum stack so vast it blotted out the sun for the better part of an hour each morning. The city below it was not ruined. That was the wrong word. It was intact, and it was wrong. The way a corpse propped up to look alive is wrong. Machines still turned on the production lines. There was no one to operate them. The lead magos, a woman whose voice came out of a Vox grill where her jaw should have been, called it heresy the moment her instruments began reading the power flows beneath the surface, and she would not explain further, only that the world's old Mechanicus custodians had not simply died. They had been converted. Something in the deep forges had rewritten them, flesh and machine both, into servants of a faith that was not the Omnissiah's. I do not have good words for what came up out of the lower levels on the 3rd night. I have tried, over the years, and I always fail, so I will just tell you what I saw, and let you make of it what you will. Skittering things, part servitor, part something that had once prayed to something other than the God Emperor, their augmetic limbs etched with a script that hurt to look at directly, that seemed to rearrange itself if you stared too long. Barrow's last cannon opened one from collarbone to hip, and it kept walking for another 4 steps before it understood it was dead. The Voxcasters screamed with feedback that was not static. I would swear to my dying breath, and I am close enough to that now to mean it, that there were words in that feedback, words in no language a human throat could make, and every trooper who heard them clearly enough went white and would not speak of it after. Threy died pulling 2 conscripts out of a collapsing gantry while one of the machine things bore down on them. I did not see it happen. I heard it over the vox, his voice perfectly calm, telling us the position was untenable and to fall back, and then nothing. Kess died 2 hours later covering our retreat from a ridgeline, picking off 3 of the things at ranges that should not have been possible in that visibility, buying us the time to get the wounded to the extraction point, and when we went back for her, because we always went back, there was nothing to recover. Then came the decision, the one I still wake up from. The lead magos determined that the corruption ran too deep to purge and too deep to contain, that Kaldrenic Prime itself had to be denied to whatever force had claimed it, permanently, entirely, before dawn. She had the authority to order it and the means to do it. A cascade detonation of the Forge World's own reactor stacks, deep enough and total enough to crack the crust. What she did not have, in that final hour, was a way to confirm that every living soul, ours and theirs, was clear of the blast radius before the window closed. Voss made the call. I watched him make it. He gave the order to seal the dropship bay 2 minutes early, with 11 of our own troopers still fighting a rearguard action on the lower concourse, because 2 minutes later meant the ship did not lift at all and none of us went home. He did not flinch when he gave the order. I have never forgiven him for that, and I have never once believed he was wrong. Pharaoh was one of the 11. She made it. Barrow was not. I still do not know if that is fair to say out loud, that a man's life came down to which side of a closing door he happened to be running toward, but that is the truth of it, and I promised myself tonight I would not soften anything. We were most of a year in transit back toward the sector capital, patched together, running short crews, when the news came in over a relay so degraded we had to hear it 3 times before we believed it. Dorseth's anchorage. A fortress world, a bastion, a place spoken of in the same breath as homeworlds like my own, a place that was supposed to be permanent, had fallen. Not besieged, fallen, whole. I will not pretend I understood the strategic weight of it then. I only understood that something I had believed could not break had broken, and that belief was the floor I had been standing on since I was 4 years old with my mother's hand over mine on a rifle stock. Dross found me on the crew deck that night, staring at nothing. He did not offer comfort in words, because Dross never did. He said, "You think the Reach still stands because it's strong. It stands because men like you keep standing in front of it. Dorseth fell because the men in front of it ran out. That's the whole of it. That's the only lesson there is." Then he put his hand on my shoulder one more time, the way he had 100 times before, and I understood finally what that hand had always meant. It did not mean you will be fine. It meant I am still here, so you can be. Dross did not survive the campaign that followed. I think he knew that night that he would not. I am old now, by the reckoning of my trade, which means I have outlived nearly everyone I have named tonight. I train recruits now, boys and girls from a dozen worlds that are not the Reach, who do not know its wind or its walls or its gray, unbroken sky. And I have stopped trying to teach them the Reach. I teach them what the Reach taught me instead, which is a different thing, and the only thing that travels. I put a hand on a private's shoulder before her first drop, the way Dross once put his on mine, and I watch it work the same small miracle it always worked, and I understand at last that this is the whole of what any of us ever really passed down. Not a homeland, a posture, a way of standing when everything in you wants to run. Tomorrow I ship out again. My hands are not what they were, and my knees complain on cold mornings the way Threy always said a man's boots would if he still cared whether he lived, and I take that as a small mercy, that I still care, after all of it. I do not know what world I'm going to, or what will be waiting in its dark places. I have stopped needing to know before I go. Pharaoh will be there, older too. Still competitive, still the only other person alive who remembers what Kaldrenic Prime sounded like in that feedback static, and neither of us will speak of it, and that silence will be its own kind of company. I keep one thing from the Reach that I never explain to the recruits until they have earned it, and I will say it now once to whoever finds this recording. It was carved into the gate arch of the fortress wall I stood watch on as a boy, worn smooth by 3 centuries of hands touching it on the way out to die. It says, "The wall does not fall while one of us is still standing in the gate." I was born under that gate. I have spent my whole life being the one still standing in it, wherever it happened to be. Tomorrow it will be somewhere new, and I will stand there anyway, because that is not a strategy. It is a vow. The Reach still stands. I mean to keep it that way, one gate at a time, for as long as I have legs to stand on. The gate holds. It has always held. It will hold tomorrow, because I will be standing in it.